Good evening and welcome to PrimetimeUGC. I'm Captain P.F. Dennis, and I'm here with my co-host Phil Bones. We return to our normal schedule this week with an author interview featuring Leviathan 99.
We also have Foundry News, Bug Report, and Feature Request of the Week. We'll also wrap it up with Published in Primetime listing all the new missions that have been submitted to us, so let's get started.
Doctor, I would speak with you regarding some discomfort I'm having. Sure, Sulek. What seems to be the trouble? In private, if you don't mind, Doctor. Don't worry about Nurse Borden, son. She's busy with her duties. That patient on the bed there went into cardiac arrest a few minutes ago. Now what's troubling you? Come on, out with it. I'm a doctor. There's nothing I haven't heard. Well, I've been on this mission out in deep space for 6 years now. It was about a year before I got the assignment. Say no more, son. I've got just the thing. Medical science has advanced to the point where we've almost licked the common cold. Blood fever? No problem. Not anymore. Now there's Vulcaden, Ponfar Reliever. It magically erases all symptoms associated with the Vulcan mating ritual. I have tried medications before, Doctor, but you've never tried Vulcaden. Just take 2 of these and you'll be right as rain. You are right, Doctor. I feel 98.35% better already. Ask your doctor about Vulcaden. There's no need to fear Ponfar. Side effects may include weight gain, weight loss, hair loss, ear pain, stomach upset, diarrhea, incontinence, flatulism, irritation of the inner eyelid, round ears, and priapism, a mind meld lasting more than 4 hours. If you experience any of these, call your doctor immediately. Patients with an allergy to plomeek root should not take Vulcaden.
Hi, my name's Phil Bones and you're watching the news on Primetime UGC. This week on Foundry, Bajor Social Map has been added to the Tribble test server. Triggers have become useful for getting NPCs to spawn in their appropriate place, and anarchy breaks out in the forums within numerous Foundry wishlist threads. Yes, Bajor is on the Tribble test server, but only as a social zone. Nerd rage is broken out amongst the Foundry community in which desperately needs new content. Many Foundry players are wondering how many more missions can use the current Foundry toolset originally. Triggers are now being used after the load screen to get NPCs in appropriate positions that align properly with details. Drogan1701 has done a tutorial explaining the technique, and many say it's just as good as triggered warping within the one map. Up next, I will delve into the anarchy in which is wish lists and bring you the bug report. Silver players, hang in there. Unfortunately, we are still having trouble activating the Foundry. Foundry slots are still being fickle in our ability to obtain them, and pathing problems seem high on the agenda, so today we'll be focusing on pathing, as well as a plea to the Foundry community towards posting on the official forum. The first thing to understand towards pathing is that it will not render until the mission is published. This goes for a lot of things in Foundry, from animation, wander, to social zone map transitions. Now that being said, some maps still have not had pathing added to them. This is the first major flaw towards Foundry's pathing. The second issue towards pathing is not all stow details have the same solidity, which means some objects you may be able to shoot through, or even get stuck inside. And last but not least, any element you add to a map does not have pathing included, including doors. So you ask, how are we supposed to move ourselves, let alone our dots, around our new amazingly designed maps? Simple. Like everything else in Foundry, we test it. This would all be very well if we didn't also have to deal with unstuck both and NPC mechanics, attack radiuses and threat levels, not to mention spawn triggers being interrupted by all of the above mentioned effects. So, I put this to you, Stowe community. Bug, issue, or design flaw? What can we do as a community to help fix this? Now to the Foundry plea. I am seeing a lot of threads being repeated over and over again in the Stowe forums. This is concerning and means that devs might have to spend more time searching for threads rather than creating or fixing content for Foundry. If you are to make a new thread, please search for the content you wish to discuss before posting. You never know what you might find. Stay tuned for the bug report, in which I will bring you an in-depth review of episode 2 of the latest features series, as well as ask you your top 5 wishlist items. Dear Cryptic, for Christmas I would like to make multiple objectives within a mission, be able to transfer costumes between gender and race, more detail. Sorry. Welcome to Feature Request. I was going to bring you the top 5 most commonly requested things in wish lists, but I'd prefer to hear from you. Next week I will read the best 5 top 5 and send the best of the best 5 top 5 wish list feature requests a choice of the following booty: 2 1-hour skill bonuses, 5 officer packs ranging from Lieutenant Commander to Rear Admiral, 1 of 2 photonic science officers, or 5 million energy credits. So send your top 5 feature requests to mailbag@primetimeugc.com and keep those feature requests coming. You never know what other booty I might come across while cleaning out my mail. So now, this week's feature request review of feature episode of Bajor. Guys! Come on, this is like a tongue twister. Some professionalism, please. Did the Rigelian write this? After the release of the first feature episode of the series, the 2800, Second Wave left a bad taste in the mouth of Stowe players. Not due to the fact it was a bad mission, but due to the confusion towards the feature episode's new direction. Off Bajor set the community at ease with a great new exploration type of Stowe mission. Lots of canon referenced, and not to mention the total immersion of an amazingly new accessible social zone. It's hard to review this episode as a Foundry mission, due to the fact authors could only dream about adding this kind of content using Foundry. I gave it Gameplay 3.5, Trek 4, Design 4.5, Difficulty 3, Grind 3, which gives an overall rating of 9 out of 10, 5 stars. However, what does this mean for Foundry? First, multiple objectives, much needed and desired as a feature for Foundry, either by giving us an option between complete all or complete one on the multiple objectives bar. Another option would be to allow us to set multiple objectives to the one detail. As for Off Bajor, I give kudos to Cryptic as multiple objectives with private instances were extremely well executed. Second, details. Some great new elements in this map, such as books, furniture, and even a new wet tuna emote. We have previously been promised features from episodes for Foundry, however yet to receive them. I say we should all enjoy drooling over this mission, as it has new details within a social zone, which means that details within the map are standard elements for use in Stowe, rather than specific elements designed for private instances or specific gameplay. Third, last but not least, we now have a new social zone to feature our new stories. I can't wait. However, still plea with Cryptic to make this available for custom map editing. Stay tuned, because coming up next is all the new Foundry missions available to play on Holodeck with Captain P.F. Dennis.
Hello, I am Solicitor Brand. Have you been injured in a transporter accident? Or maybe some careless hoarder rubbed against you in the turbo lift someplace, causing third-degree burns? How about all those terrible viruses that alien visitors bring with them to your planet? It's enough to make your lobes itch. Well, I'm here to tell you that you could be entitled to gold-pressed latinum, and a lot of it. Like the 182nd rule of acquisition states, if all else fails, sue. That's where I come in. I will fight to my last breath to get us the latinum you deserve, or at least what you can get. Just listen to Mr. Bollock, one of my clients.
It's true. My wife and I were finally able to get away to Riza for a well-earned vacation. We arrived as planned and beamed down from a Bolian transport vessel with the rest of the passengers. When we reached the surface, one of my kidneys had been replaced with some Andorian woman's carry-on bag. Later that night, a lifeguard had to pry my missing kidney out of a stray targ's mouth. It really put a damper on the whole vacation. Somebody had to pay, and Solicitor Brand made sure they did.
Thank you, Mr. Bollock. I know how terrible it was for you, but I'm glad I could help you get the justice you deserved. The transport owner took care of all Mr. Bollock's medical expenses and extended hospital stay. And I didn't even collect a single slip of latinum, thanks to Mrs. Bollock and her talent for umaks. And remember, if I don't win, you don't pay much.
Brand, he'll fix your problem if he can. Oh, Brand, for compensation, he's your man.
In the Federation justice system, the people are represented by two separate yet equally important groups: the Starfleet officers who investigate violations, and the silicon-based life forms who prosecute the offenders. These are their stories.
Good evening. This episode's Foundry Essentials is not about building missions, but about rating them. As an author, it is quite frustrating to receive a 1-star review. A 1-star is a pretty serious indictment in the UGC world. I haven't played a mission personally that is deserving of such a low rating. It is also a lasting and visible scar on the record of an author's hard work. For the purposes of illustrating my point, I have only my own missions to use as visual aids, but this is to do with every Foundry author. They could all show you similar examples. That being said, there may very well be a mission out there that may be deserving of a 1-star review, whether I've seen one or not. But more often than not, a 1-star rating is undeserved. Players enroll to be reviewers, and unfortunately, some of them have no idea how the Foundry works or what its limitations might be. Anyone familiar with the Foundry knows that it is still a beta version, and it is far less than perfect. Most times the 1-star stain is a result of a bug in the Foundry or one of its many accepted idiosyncrasies. For example, the map transition took way too long is not something within an author's control. Neither is, my tune fell through the floor as soon as it spawned. I couldn't even play it. Anyone with common sense should realize that an author would not choose to have this happen. Obviously, it's some sort of bug. On top of this, the mission receives the 1-star by a reviewer who couldn't even play it. How would he or she know if it were not the best mission he or she had ever played? Yes, it is frustrating to have these bugs occur, but there are far better ways to handle it than to brand what may have been an otherwise fantastic mission with a rating that for most missions could take months to recover from. How about not rating it at all, especially if you could not even play it? You cannot fairly critique work that you have not even seen. Just hit the cancel button and move on. Another helpful method is to send the author a short in-game email about the problem. As an author, I'm certain he or she would want to know so they can take a look at it right away. We call it a community for a reason. Yes, there is a healthy rivalry amongst most Foundry authors, but there is a respect that accompanies and even outweighs any sort of vindictiveness or just plain breaches in etiquette. Are there legitimate reasons for a bad review? Of course. An author may be new or let a few typos slip by. Maybe you love combat and the mission didn't contain much. Perhaps you felt that the uniform style used broke your immersion. These are common gripes, none of which deserve the indignation of a one-star review. My advice is to get to know what authors are and are not responsible for before you sign up to review community-authored material. Here is a question. Can a Foundry author select the type and amount of drops or rewards in his or her mission? If you answered yes, you would be incorrect. The Foundry in its present incarnation is a very limited tool with which some very creative people have toiled long and hard to bring something to the community for the community. And such a scathing review is a base insult that is almost never deserved. Every author's handle is available at the start of a mission, as are, in most cases, directions and/or notes about the mission. Another good habit to get into is to read the mission descriptions carefully. 9 out of 10 times when a player cannot find the starting point of a mission, it is because they could not be bothered to read the description first. I'm familiar with the arguments about this. I hate reading. By the time I actually start, I have forgotten. I shouldn't have to write things down to play a mission. Okay, that's fine. My answer to this is a question. If you do not want to put the effort into playing the mission, why do you want to be a reviewer? Reviewing missions is a responsibility that a player has accepted willingly. We ask that the responsibility be taken seriously. The one-star review is a serious consequence. It is hurtful to authors to know that they can be doled out so frivolously and oftentimes without the least bit of explanation to back it up. Imagine if there were a rebuttal window for the author where they could rate the review. The sheer amount of typos and bad grammar or lack of any coherent review at all, accompanied by a 1-star. On occasion it's very humorous, but not very often or for very long. After all, Star Trek Online is a game. Games are intended to be fun. The rating system was not put in place to be hurtful. I ask that all of you out there take this into consideration the next time, say, your Vulcan tactical officer delivers dialogue containing a contraction or mentions a feeling. Foundry authors are not mind readers, and they are attempting to bring something of quality to the community. If their creative hands are tied by such minor complaints, the next complaint will be that all these missions sound the same, and characters have no personality. 1 star. Thank you for watching, and in advance for your consideration. This has been another Foundry Essentials. If you have any comments or suggestions, feel free to contact us at mailbag@PrimetimeUGC.com.
All this training, battle drills, and killing works up quite a thirst, and even though we are Jem'Hadar, we occasionally get fatigued, especially when we become honored elders like me. That's why I love Victory Energy Drink. Victory gives you that 26-hour boost that Jem'Hadar over 20 sometimes require. First, and Victory contains half the sugars of other energy drinks. First, so it's much less filling and won't slow you down. First. What is it, second? Victory is also the only energy drink that contains the isogenic enzyme that every Jem'Hadar needs. That's right. It's brewed from the finest trinucleic fungi this side of the Cabrel system. It keeps me alert so I can keep killing and maiming all day long without tiring. And it's got half the calories of other brands. I am First Ren, and I am tired. And at our age, we are all tired. We drink to reclaim our energy. This we do gladly, because we are Jem'Hadar. And remember, victory is light. Victory is light.
Don't hate me because I've got gorgeous wrinkles. Some girls are born with it, but for the rest of us, there's Baudet. It's made from the neural secretions of the finest galamites. Nothing dehydrates the skin more gently and naturally. and Baudet contains nearly twice the concentration of any other dehydrating wrinkle cream, leaving your face rough and abrasive. Irresistible. Don't hate me because my wrinkles are beautiful. Not that it matters. You probably aren't good enough for me anyway. Baudet. For the rest of us.
This week on Primetime UGC, we return to our normal format with our usual author interview. This week's guest is one of our most cherished veteran authors. Welcome, please, Leviathan 99. How long have you been playing STO, and when did you start making Foundry missions?
Well, let's see. I was at the very tail end of closed beta. It was something I'd been following for a while, but I think I forgot my original account, so I was never able to get that. They had that title that you could get if you had supported the game for, it was like 2 years prior to launch. They had some sort of poll that they were trying to win, and they were trying to get people to sign up for the site. And I don't actually remember what my original account was. I was never able to trace that down, so I didn't get that title. But I'd been following its development for a long time, and actually I was an old school City of Heroes player, and I used to get threads shut down for being off topic all the time because I wanted Cryptic to develop a Star Trek MMO. So that's going back like 5 years. 6 years, longer. First Foundry mission, I suspect a lot of the people in the authorship community, I was involved in the Red Shirt beta for the Foundry. I didn't actually publish a mission during the beta. Instead, I went around sort of poking and prodding, looking for sort of obscure little bugs and tricks, potential exploits. When it hit Tribble, I did my first mission, and then starting last spring, I started doing missions on the live server. So
you came over probably with Lord of Pit from Champions Online. Did you ever play with their Foundry tool at all?
Well, Champions
City of
doesn't have a
Heroes,
Foundry.
sorry.
City of Heroes. I actually see that actually came in after Cryptic stopped developing it, and I had shifted over to WoW at that point. I was a big follower of. I think I got into the initial hype behind City of Heroes, and I became a real big fan of Jack Emmert and a lot of the original crew, and I think between Cryptic splitting and I'm probably one of the odd ones who wasn't affected, and old school City of Heroes players will recognize this phrase, enhancement diversification. I was one of the ones who fell down pretty much on Jack's side of that, and a lot of people, I think Jack Emmert became a dirty word for them for a while, but I really liked the original City of Heroes development team, and after they left, I kind of got sucked into WoW, and so Star Trek Online was sort of my return to Cryptic. I was in beta for Champions, but you know how they run their betas at Cryptic. A lot of them, especially back then, were timed events on weekends, and I didn't make too many of the beta test sessions. So
You have 3 missions published on Holodeck. Would it be fair to say that your philosophy toward it is fewer missions with much more attention paid to detail?
yeah, I would say that I have yet to spend a lot of time on any one of my missions. I realize some people spend months and months. You have, I think, City of the Polmar was one that the author spent a long time on. Most of my missions are in and out, concept to execution, done in about 48 hours. My last one, I spent maybe about 10 combined days on. I designed the initial map back in October. Then the contest came up for Podcast UGC, and I co-opted a map that I'd been tinkering with. And I'll go into the Foundry and I'll tinker with maps, but for the most part, I don't spend a lot of time on missions. Big thing is I'm in grad school right now, so I look forward to those times when I can set aside 2 or 3 days just to crank out a mission, and I try not to get wrapped up in it. I tend to get wrapped up in the forums really easy, but the upside to that is I can always have Word open in another tab and feel productive.
Would you say that your as big a Star Trek fan as you are a gamer?
Probably a little bit more so, and I will say I played around with as a little kid with my dad's TI cartridge-based personal computer system. They had those back in the 80s. I would play around with that. I did a little bit of basic programming. I was in the computer club at school. But the whole thing that got me into computers at home was my uncle was a huge Star Trek fan, and he also built computers. And a lot of times I would inherit, he'd take his spare parts and put together I'm going to date myself here, a 486 or a Pentium. and he had a lot of Star Trek and Star Wars games. And, I had a Super Nintendo, and I played a lot of games. But honestly, I think this is going to sound odd. The big thing that I played on the Super Nintendo was Starfleet Academy. And I liked getting into that with the Game Genie. People use the Game Genie on those consoles to cheat, but what I like doing with them, it's effectively, I think, maybe a memory editing process. I think you're sort of editing blocks of information in memory is how that works, because it seems to match up to some of the RAM hacking stuff I've seen. And so you're editing blocks of information in memory. Sometimes you can unlock stuff in those old console games, like a level that was unfinished that they just left on the cartridge, or a ship that was put in the game. There was, I recall in Starfleet Academy, there was a flat kind of Galaxy-class shaped ship that you could unlock with the Game Genie, or maybe it was the Pro Action Replay. But anyway, you could get in there through covert means and get your hands on this invincible ship that was shaped like a flat Galaxy class. So I've always been into sort of poking at the innards of games. I suppose you could say that I'm probably somebody who likes to tinker first, Star Trek fan second, and gamer third.
So what series of Star Trek are you most inspired by?
I grew up very, with TNG. I can remember Deep Space Nine was on in syndication where I lived, and I guess it was syndication everywhere. And my family would sit around and watch Deep Space Nine. Deep Space Nine is one I probably feel it's my favorite, but I have good memories of watching the other series with people. I had really close friends in college, and we had an apartment. We had pictures of Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday, Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones, and Captain Kirk up on our wall. Like, that was our wall of heroes. How can you not like Kirk? You love to hear Picard speak. I think a lot of us wish that we could be Picard, but when it comes to Kirk, if there's a problem, he can punch it or seduce it.
Who do you primarily make your missions for?
I think a lot of it for me, I write for myself. Going back to when I was in high school, they had the open submissions policy for the Star Trek shows. And I was always amassing these script ideas that I was trying to turn into scripts, which, getting Paramount's attention then at 17 was pretty unlikely. But I built up a lot of script ideas, and I tend to, I was cruising the Star Trek Encyclopedia then, and I cruise Memory Alpha now, and I like connecting the dots. My favorite episodes of Star Trek are probably Voyager's Conspiracy Theory, and the Deep Space Nine episodes with the augments, where they're plotting everything out on the blackboard.
Right.
And so I think, like, on a certain level, I try not to push it too much in people's faces. I like to give people the option to shoot things because I like shooting things. But I'm definitely trying to write missions for people who like maybe having hidden connections between things opened up. And I feel like it's a way that I can do Foundry missions that aren't necessarily going to contradict what Cryptic's doing, because I'm off kind of playing in the margins.
All your missions are unique with original design elements. How do you approach your concepts?
I play around in the Foundry an awful lot. Honestly, a lot of it, I have more ideas about how to use things in the Foundry than I've implemented, some of which because they're time-consuming. I'm sure most Foundry authors, experienced Foundry authors, have figured this out at this point, but it's like if you want to have a staircase that you've built from scratch in Foundry missions, you're going to have a series of platforms that are each elevated. It takes time doing the data entry just to make a staircase. And so I have lots of ideas for things that, are just too time consuming to do. And I have to say, I'm always a little bit jealous of Kirk that because he comes out with these tutorials, usually, maybe about 7 days after after I figured out how to do something. And my attitude was always, I would eventually like to get into doing tutorials, but I want to have first dibs. So I usually try to save a lot of my concepts so that I try to be the first one I see doing it. And if I see somebody else doing it, then I'll find a way to cram it into my missions, because people who play my missions to have something happen in there and say, how did he do that? I mean, it's like I have figured out, probably the one thing I haven't seen anybody do that I have a method of doing is I figured out how to have shuttles take off and land inside a mission. Half of my Foundry slots are just taken up with test maps for things I'm playing around with. And some of it, I think, it just sort of naturally lends itself to use in certain ways, like the holodeck thing. And I think I've got 2 missions with holodecks in them. Each one of them uses the holodeck text slightly different. But, when you've got an asset that's a holodeck fading in or a holodeck fading out, where my brain goes is, okay, how can I use that? When they add the Constitution interior to the game, one of my first thoughts is going to be, what's the story I can make around this? And how can I pair this with something it doesn't ordinarily go with? How can I get Jim Hadar on that ship?
Would you say that a lot of your story ideas are based off a map first?
Oh, yeah, definitely. You have to know if something's doable. And I feel like that's where you test your limitations first, because that's where the limitations are going to be first. You can't set a mission in a place you can't make a map for. In some cases, I'll have to rewrite the story around what kind of maps I can make. So, yeah, I feel like it really, for me, I start with a plot, I go to the map, and you may have noted that the faster I produce a mission, sometimes the more typos there are, but that's partly because I tend to write dialogue as I go. And I do that because I don't necessarily know if what I have in mind next is going to turn out to be feasible. One of the things I've been playing with for a long time is the idea of having a warp core meltdown. And that was actually supposed to be in my first Foundry mission. And I wanted to have it so that you're exiting the warp core area of a ship, and that big door is coming down behind you. And I figured out a way to do it, but it was kind of buggy, and I noticed that if you ran too fast or too slow, that you might wind up getting trapped on the wrong side of the door. And, of course, that would be realistic. But, sometimes you just have to test something, and if it's not feasible, then it winds up on the cutting room floor. And so I find that having the map in place, and sometimes, maybe I don't have things in the event timeline, I'll have just a series of triggers by waypoints or by clicking on an object just to test to see how something looks. And if it doesn't look right, then it can't go in the mission.
With all the free-to-play, all these new people coming in, what would be your best advice to a new Foundry author?
My best advice to a Foundry author is to poke around the forums and some of the documentation. There's probably more on the Champions fan sites. Learn the demo record tool, which is what I believe you guys used to put together this podcast.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you learn the demo record tool, when you're playing someone else's mission, you can do a demo record. Then you can go into a demo and you can zoom the camera all around and see how they put their map together. I think I'm erring a little bit towards what Have on Podcast UGC would call ziggurat construction here, which is where you have people build these amazing ziggurats, but maybe there's not much mission behind it. But I try to have the mission too. But I think sometimes you go into these Foundry missions and you see an environment and you say, how did somebody do that? Well, if you do a demo file and you go into the demo edit mode, you can zoom a camera all around, and you can see how they assembled the pieces of their map together. And once you know how they do it, it becomes a lot easier to do it yourself.
Where would you like to see Foundry in a year's time?
I would like some integration of the duty officer system. That doesn't mean necessarily the ability to create our own duty officer assignments, but if we could take prefab duty officer assignments, apply our own text, drop them in a mission, and like the recent featured episode, if we could make it so that that's a component of mission completion, or that's a component of triggers, so you could send duty officers out, and depending on whether they succeed or fail, Actually, it's probably better if it's triggers rather than completion, because you could have, for instance, a door that's locked, and you could send the duty officers out, and if they're able to open that door, the player gets a shortcut. If they're not able to open that door, they don't. Of course, I suppose inherent in that is the idea that we could have branching mission objectives too, which I think is, I think that's kind of the holy grail. I kind of suspect that the dev tool set is somewhat limited in that regard too. I think there's some kind of crazy hacking that they do with their own tool set to get branching stuff in place. But I think that up until that point, players in a Foundry mission or in a Cryptic mission without branching effects are effectively playing through a novel. And if you're just playing through a novel, then the end is predetermined and you don't really get to shape that very much. You know, there are things that we can do, like we can have a dialogue tree at the end, but in terms of radically different endings that somebody could possibly activate through their own choices, we really do need some sort of branching mechanism. And I suppose tied into the branching mechanism is the idea that once we get cutscene tools in place, this is something else I've been thinking a lot about, and I think it would benefit Cryptic as well. Sometimes there isn't really room for a plot to branch in different directions, and I think I tend to do standalone Foundry missions, but people who do a series, and Cryptic, who most of their missions are in a series, they do need things to end up in a certain place. So one thing that I would like to see, and this isn't in terms of the general game, but also the Foundry, I would like to see maybe outside of missions having the ability to go and talk to a superior officer, a bartender, a counselor, and have that character recognize what the last mission you completed was and be able to have a conversation with you about it. And then, maybe based on your responses to a dialogue, you could get duty officer commendation experience or something like that. The idea being that sometimes the plot itself can't change, but how you feel about it can. And I think by having a way that people can register their opinion on the mission they just played in character, it creates a sense of immersion, and it creates a sense that even if you can't control the events, your character can have a unique view on it. I mean, I'm sure I think that would sound really frivolous to somebody on the Champions team, but I think on the Stowe team, I think it makes sense, the idea that you finish up a mission. It's like what was the Romulan mission that everybody thought was so controversial?
Oh, Davide and Impera?
The Davide at Impera. If after completing that mission, a lot of people have a lot of unresolved issues as to whether or not their captain did the right thing or was being railroaded into doing something stupid. And at the end, even if you don't have that branch, if at the end you could just walk into a bar, have a conversation with a Ferengi bartender, and have that really played out with some cool cinematics, maybe some ambient characters who pop their head into the conversation, you get to give your opinion. And in giving your opinion, it determines, say, that you get one type of commendation XP versus another. I think that allows the story to be fixed, but it allows the player to feel like they have some control over their fate. That's the sort of thing, big picture, I'd like to see for the game and the Foundry, is the idea, your fate may be set in stone. The fate of the galaxy may be set in stone, but you're entitled to your opinion about it. And so you have your own story in addition to the game having its story. And I think the more things that and mechanics that people can come up with that support that type of thinking, the more this will grow, not just as a single-player RPG, but as an MMO, because people will begin to distinguish themselves based on their personality.
Well, Leviathan99, we thank you for joining us on Primetime UGC, and look forward to your next mission. I'm sure the whole of the Foundry community joins me in the sentiment. Next up, I'll be bringing you Published in Primetime. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Block. Strike. Oh, by the sword of Kalis. Wake. Wake, little warrior. You should have taken that batak in 4 moves. Ah! What? Klingons don't lie. Stop it right now. Wait a minute. Did you have a meal this morning before the contest?
No, Father.
No? Foolish child. That is why you failed. You must eat a good meal to keep your strength up and be alert. Come, I have just the thing. Kellogg's Rock Bites, the live cereal that contains all the nutrients a growing Klingon warrior needs. And they taste great too. Why, we've had rocked bites from the house of Kellogg around our table for generations. Why, one bowl of this, and you'll be able to ground your friend out there into dust. You will have your vengeance, my little warrior. And remember the proverb, revenge is a dish best served cold, and Rock Bites is a cold cereal. It is a meal fit for Kahless himself, and it's part of an honorable breakfast. Now go out there and gut your enemy. Ha 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 ha.
Welcome to this week's Published in Primetime, where I'll be running down the newest missions that have been submitted to our mailbag and to the STO forum post entitled Promote Your Foundry Mission. We have quite a few Fed missions as well as a KDF mission this week, so let me get right into it with the newest Fed mission from Evil 70th, called Contamination. There is also a series on the Fed list by Slick Rick 1701E, entitled The Endeavor Series. It's a 9-part adventure beginning with a mission called Infinite Avatar. We've got Lost Ship by Zero Navigator, Demon Planet and Demon Planet Adventure Edition by Pendra 80, Checks and Balances by My God, It's Full of Stars, Vampire Epilogue by Kirkbot. We have Romulan Revenge, Save the Utopia, and Two Cans in a String, all by Omega Glory. Now for the KDF side, this week we've got a first-time author named Hatchery, with Replay, the Battle of Kronos, in which the player relives the events of the Klingon Civil War through the eyes of Worf. The player even gets to fight as Gowron aboard the IKS Bortas. I'm sure the author would appreciate any support and feedback on his mission, and we hope he continues to learn and make more. That's going to do it for this week's Primetime UGC. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Watch for our announcements about the next guest author, and, as always, send us your mission information at mailbag@primetimeugc.com. Have a great 2 weeks, everyone, and good night.